The story started with a terrible, desperate cry from someone whose face was covered in blood and whose eyes showed evident signs of fear and horror. After that, horrible creatures with flaming red eyes attacked fast and with a scary, fearsome force. As these huge creatures charged ahead, people ran away in all directions, screaming in dread and commotion, and the whole area was filled with fear. A huge explosion happened in the center of the battlefield all of a sudden. It sent people flying and knocked some people down because it was so strong. It caused a lot of chaos on the battlefield. Then a strong warrior showed up. His crimson eyes were full of wrath and might as he swung his sword to fight off the beasts and stop the attack. The warrior kept fighting hard, using his weapon to hit and create huge bursts of energy that pushed the beasts back with great power. Another huge and violent explosion happened, proving how fierce the fight was and making it even more dramatic. Another huge explosion sent a huge beam of light crashing down to the ground, where it had a huge effect on the land and everything around it. After these things happened, the courageous warrior stood tall with his sword, which had a strange and tremendous force that came from it. It was called Eos, and it was the Empire's strongest blade. Then came Death Knight, a sinister figure in beautiful black armor who was scary to look at. A precise attack hit the Death Knight, breaking his mask. The Death Knight looked hurt, bending down and tired, but his fiery eyes still shone with anger and resolve. The Death Knight's eyes became wide in amazement and disbelief as he beheld something that shocked him to the core. The whole scene looked like a fight that had just ended. Flames were everywhere, and the Death Knight was breathing heavily as he glanced around at the damage. After that, a terrible enemy showed there, clapping with joy at how well he had destroyed the wretched Empire. This beast kept relishing the destruction, saying that revenge is better the longer you wait for it. The scary creature stood tall and said that he had finally kept a promise he made 1,000 years ago. He was quite happy to have gotten his revenge. Finally, the terrifying creature's actual identity was revealed. Archlich Dorgos, who had a terrifying skeleton body and eyes that burned crimson. Emperor Hadad yelled at him in anger for slaughtering his people. Dorgos smiled and made fun of the emperor's harsh comments, thinking they were a nice curse. Dorgos said in a mocking way that it was time for his coronation ceremony and that he was done talking. But Emperor Hadad said that it was impossible for someone like him to become king. Dorgos triumphantly said that he had united the continent for the first time in history and that he should be called the new emperor. The former emperor looked completely beaten and worn out, and he fell to his knees in apparent pain. Dorgos then thanked the Demon Kings, the Death Knight, and his commanders for their hard work, which helped him win. He then told them to bring the royal crown forward so he may be crowned. Dorgos' followers, who were waiting for his orders, brought the royal crown. The Death Knight walked up to Dorgos with the crown in hand, showing how devoted he was. Dorgos congratulated the Death Knight in particular, thanking him for his commitment and outstanding help in winning this battle. He then thought about how he could repay him, but the Death Knight didn't say anything, and it was evident that he was unsure and emotionally torn. Dorgos concluded the conversation in a rude and insulting way, saying that the Death Knight was only a slave to him and that the inquiry was stupid. The Death Knight, who looked like he had once been a slave, reached out his hands to the crown and said that serving that body was his greatest joy. But all of a sudden, the crown flew away from him, and Dorgos looked shocked and confused. It seemed like an enormous force had thrown the crown in a different direction. Dorgos' followers were shocked, and their faces showed it. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Dorgos started to channel a huge amount of power, and his hands glowed with a bright red, burning light. His Demon Kings got ready for fight and charged forward to try to stop the Death Knight's attack. Even still, the Death Knight looked quite angry and didn't seem scared of Dorgos or his companions at all. Dorgos was in a state of panic, furiously and confusedly asking what the Death Knight was doing. He was visibly astonished because he hadn't told him to do this. The Death Knight spoke clearly and said, finally, as his actual self, and will began to show through. He said frankly that he was now in full control of his body, and that he moved only when he wanted to. Dorgos was surprised and asked how the Death Knight could talk when he was sure he had fully obliterated his will. The Death Knight, on the other hand, said that his will just seemed to be gone. It had never really gone away. The Death Knight said that he had been stuck inside his own body, watching everything happen without being able to do anything about it. Dorgos, trying to get back in charge, declared that the Death Knight was his best work, and that he would let him let out his rage today only. Dorgos told his Demon Kings to attack the Death Knight all at once in an effort to regain power by force. But the Death Knight stopped the onslaught and used a huge destructive power against them that scared Dorgos. This power generated a huge burst of energy that sent all of Dorgos' followers flying away in an instant. Dorgos was shocked by how strong the Death Knight was since he had beaten all the Demon Kings at once. After that, Dorgos chose to unleash a much stronger spell to take back control of the situation. He used his sorcery to call up a huge army of ghosts and dead people to fight the Death Knight. This army of demons and undead attacked in a fierce and disorganized way, charging for the Death Knight. But the Death Knight kept his ground and fought fiercely, without exhibiting any fear in the face of this huge attack. The Death Knight told the zombie army to stop right now, and he did it with full confidence and strength. Then he gave a clear order for all the demons and undead to kill themselves at the same time. The undead and demons followed this order right away, starting a mass suicide and self-detonation right away. This caused a huge and terrible explosion that almost destroyed everything around Dorgos and filled him with fear. Dorgos was completely shocked by this incredible power and wondered in horror if he had made a monster with strength that was equal to that of the Overlord. Dorgos tried to calm the Death Knight down by saying he understood how angry he was and would feel the same way if he were in his shoes. But in his mind, Dorgos reassured himself that even if his body were destroyed, he could always transfer his soul to another backup body and take control again. The Death Knight then revealed that he had spent all of his long time in prison thinking about how to kill Dorgos. The Death Knight started to amass a lot of energy so he could launch a really strong strike. The Death Knight said he had come up with a special sword move that would kill Dorgos by permanently splitting his soul apart. Dorgos was terrified and couldn't believe it was happening. He knew it was dangerous though, so he opted to avoid the attack for now. He ran away quickly, attempting to get away from a lethal strike that was coming at him quickly. But the Death Knight quickly came up to him and hit him hard from above, making a huge show in the skies. Dorgos went through a peculiar moment of quiet. He looked shaken and didn't want to believe what had just transpired. Dorgos thought for a second that he had lived and started to laugh, saying that the technique was just an illusion. But then, all of a sudden, he screamed in pain and horror as the Death Knight's blow penetrated his body for good. As he fell, a vortex of dark energy formed around him, throwing Dorgos' body up into the air. His body kept plummeting from the heavens in pain and astonishment. Then, because of the blow, his body exploded violently, and the Death Knight remained there calmly watching. Dorgos' broken head hit the ground with a lot of force. The Death Knight walked up to him and told him to go to hell without thinking or showing any pity. Then he lifted his foot and stomped down hard on the last bits of Dorgos' head. The Death Knight stomped on the pieces of Dorgos' head, killing him totally. Emperor Hadad was shocked by what he saw and asked out loud what had just happened. The Death Knight fell on his knees in exhaustion and gently remarked that it was finally finished. The Death Knight made up his mind to do one last act that had to be done in a deep silence. He wished he could see the individuals he had lost, even if it was just in death. He thought he should say sorry to the people he hurt when Dorgos was in charge of him. He could clearly remember what he had done in the past, like how he had once stabbed an innocent person and raised them up with his blade without mercy. He was very sad and sorry, and tears filled his eyes as he silently repeated his apologies to the family he had harmed. In a moment that changed everything, the Death Knight stabbed himself in the chest with his sword, killing himself as punishment for his sins. Damien, a sweet voice suddenly called out to him. He knew it was his sister's voice. He saw a clear picture of his sister in front of him. She gently asked him why he was sleeping there, and he felt a deep sense of serenity. Damien was startled to see that his sister looked young and attractive. He wondered how she could look so young. Then her soft grin took him by surprise. He asked her, surprised, "Why you look so young?" She laughed and wondered if he was attempting to flatter her so she would defend him when their father yelled at him. She told him to believe her and come home right away because it might rain shortly. Damien woke up confused to see his sister sprinting toward their family's house. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He suddenly realized that he had torn down the palace with his own hands. How could it still be there in front of him? Damien was shocked and looked at his hands, wondering if he was dreaming right then. But then he had scary ideas as he remembered Dorgos holding him like a puppet. He wondered if everything he had just gone through was a dream, or if what he was seeing now was a dream. Damien started to mistrust what he was seeing, so he decided to test it himself. He picked up the stick from the ground and headed toward a big rock, hoping that this test would be enough to show the truth. Damien hit the rock hard with the stick, as if he were employing a high-level fighting move. But the stick broke right away when it hit, which shocked Damien utterly. Damien thought it was crazy at first. Maybe nothing out of the ordinary had really happened. But just a few seconds later, the rock erupted with a huge force from the impact of the strike, showing how strong Damien had become. At first, Damien laughed gently because he was shocked by what had happened. But his soft laughing quickly became into uncontrollable laughter, which showed how shocked and disbelieving he was. He fell to the ground, tired and breathing heavily from the shock. He stayed in the rain, his hands clenched hard in pain and stress, trying to understand what was going on. At that point, Damien knew for sure that what had happened to him wasn't simply a dream. It was all true. He smiled widely, even though it was raining, and told himself that he had really gone back in time. Damien started to remember his old life and how he was good at getting into trouble. His family had always said, "He really is crazy." He remembered his irate father yelling at him for embarrassing the family when he was kicked out of a public place for raising a commotion. He also remembered how his brother had been mad at him for assaulting Marquis Leon Bloom's kid, which caused a big controversy, and how his brother had yelled at him since his sister Louise had to leave because of his reckless actions. He saw a picture of his sister in a carriage crying because he had ruined her future. He also remembered how his mother cried and asked him why he had so carelessly mortgaged the family's land and borrowed money. Damien sadly remembered that he didn't stop there. His actions cost the family all of their money. In the end, because of all this, his father kicked him out of the house for good and told him never to come back. When he was about to go, his sister Louise stopped him and gave him some money, begging him to be happy no matter what. His sister gazed at him with love and murmured, "Be happy," which made Damien's heart hurt. Damien felt terrible sorrow for ruining his sister's life with his terrible mistakes. He then hurriedly took the money from her hand, pulling her hand away and going away fast, feeling embarrassment and grief that he couldn't put into words. He felt real regret and shame for the first time in his life that day, when he ran away from his family's house. Damien sat on the dirt, thinking about how he had gotten back to the past. He started to remember the last moments of his old life, when he had resolved to say sorry to his family before he died. He had never thought he would really go back in time. He looked up at the platters and pondered if nukes had done what they did. Damien suddenly saw something weird in his hand, which made him doubt even more what was going on with him. Damien sat and thought about how hard it had been for him to learn even the most basic combat moves in the past, especially the one called Shattering Wave. He could clearly picture the approach in his mind, including how powerful and terrible it was. Damien told himself that it was a technique that made a strike stronger and more powerful, giving it incredible, devastating power. He remembered a fight against a strong knight in the past when this move was known as Wallbreaker. Damien told himself that he had learned this skill after defeating and killing that knight. A voice from far away suddenly shouted out, "Young master," and Damien quietly turned to look. He observed a servant sprinting toward him, fast and eagerly coming from the house. Damien stared at the servant and thought about it for a time. He tried to recall his name and wondered, what was his name again? Was it Victor? He paused for a moment and then inquired, "Victor?" to make sure he had the right name. The servant hurriedly and anxiously confirmed that Lady Louise had told him to come back to the house right away and was astonished that he was still outside. The servant hesitantly said that the head of the family was very angry, which made Damien stop and think, did I do something wrong? The servant was shocked by the remark and answered quickly, "No, and are you really saying you don't know what you did?" Damien's face clearly showed that he was confused and surprised. He clearly hadn't remembered what trouble he had caused. "You scoundrel!" A furious voice yelled from within the mansion. It was the voice of the Viscount of Mansion Haxon. When Damien walked into the house, his father tried to hit him, but Damien quickly averted the blow with great ability. Damien's father lost his footing and fell to the floor because he had been so cleanly dodged. He was shocked by how powerful and precise his kid was all of a sudden. Damien glanced down at his father, who was lying on the ground, and screamed, "You really are insane." His father got back up, enraged, and yelled that Damien had been booted out of a bar after starting a huge brawl, which brought shame on the whole family. Damien's mother and sister tried to stop him and calm him down. Damien definitely remembered that this moment had happened before, and he now knew he was back in it again. His sister and mother begged him to calm down and think clearly. "Do you really want to kill Damien?" his mother said. Damien stared at his family, and their names became obvious again. His father, Paul Haxon, his mother, Marita Haxon, and his sister, Louise Haxon. He wanted to see their faces again. Damien immediately started to cry silently in front of his family, who didn't understand why he was crying so quickly. His sister asked in wonder if Damien was really crying, and his mother, who was extremely sad, said that maybe everything had gotten too hard for him. His father interrupted the pause of the harsh query, asking what kind of apology Damien had made this time and encouraging him to speak up if he had something to say. But Damien calmly and clearly said, "I have no excuses." His father was clearly shocked by the unexpected answer. He kept saying, "No excuses?" He couldn't believe it. He asked how Damien, who always offered lame excuses, could say something like that suddenly. Damien calmly and plainly said that he had damaged the honor of House Haxon with his faults, and that he would take full responsibility without making any excuses. His father still didn't believe him, and thought Damien was just trying to get out of trouble. He stated he wouldn't let him off so easily. Damien then stood up straight and bowed slightly to his father, who was surprised and confused by what Damien meant when he said, "I will take care of it." Damien then started to walk away, informing his family that he would go fix the situation he had made himself. He stopped for a moment at the door, turned to his father, and said that he would come back to get the punishment he deserved after he had taken care of the problem. Damien smiled with great assurance as he left the house, promising them that he would return back to accept whatever punishment his father chose once everything was settled. His family were quiet and shocked when he went. The father was visibly confused and wondered out loud if Damien had hit his head and changed his mind, since his behavior was so weird and sudden. Damien got to the commercial city, which is recognized for its tall buildings and famous landmarks. Victor, his servant, told him that they had arrived at their objective as they went through the city together. Victor glanced worriedly at Damien and inquired whether he was really going to go into a place that was said to be supported by a criminal group. He was afraid that something might go wrong. Damien calmly told Victor that he could go home first if he was scared, but Victor insisted on staying with him even though he was scared. Damien smiled at Victor and told him not to worry. He was just going to say sorry to the owner of the place, and nothing awful would happen. He told Victor that he would take care of everything and come back. Damien kept heading toward the intended spot, and Victor followed him, praying that everything would go well. Damien thought again about how he had gotten back to the past in such a bizarre way as he walked alone. However, he promised himself that he would never hurt his family again, and that he would not waste the chance that fate, or maybe the divine, had given him. As he went around the city, he promised himself that he would repair each mistake he had done in the past. Two individuals who seemed suspicious saw him while he was walking. One of them was shocked to see him again. The two men came up to him and asked him in a very rude way why he had come back after they had told him not to show his face again. Damien glanced at them and tried to remember something about their faces. Even after all this time, they felt strangely familiar. He calmly and firmly said that he had merely come to say sorry to the owner for the trouble he had caused last time. The two men looked at him in shock for a time, and then they started to make fun of him. One of them laughed and said he would tell the supervisor about the apology, while the other looked startled by how kind Damien was acting. One of them said that he had heard that Damien was the irresponsible oldest son of a bad family, but he appeared more reasonable today than they had thought he would be. Then they started to make fun of him in a nasty way, stating they had heard about Damien's lovely sister and started talking about her in a rude and unpleasant way. One of them held Damien's face hard and sneered, saying he wanted him to declare he was sorry right away and that he should sacrifice his lovely sister in exchange for forgiveness. The man then observed something weird happening, and Damien felt a strong wrath and disdain rise up inside him. Damien quickly took the knife from the man's hand and stood in front of him, calmly waving it. He said he thought he could swiftly settle the issue and come back without any problems, but it looked like he had overrated himself this time. The other man got angry and started yelling, then tried to hit Damien again. But before he could reach him, he was hit with a swift and forceful blow that cut off his hand. The second man was shocked to see that his face was badly hurt, and the whole event quickly turned into shock and confusion. Damien stood his ground firmly against the men who had attacked him, and a horrible dark aura came from him that shocked everyone around. Damien said in a calm voice that he would show these men what they really wanted to see. Then he ran toward them at an amazing speed. He braced himself with a lot of strength, and a scary shadow emerged behind him. People watching couldn't believe how reckless the infamous oldest son of House Haxon really was. Victor, the servant, observed from a distance, shaking with worry as he shouted out to his young lord. Victor started yelling out of anger and fear, telling Damien that he had promised to take care of it personally. At the same time, screams and shouts started to come from the building that Damien had gone into. Some people standing by wanted to see inside, but one of them told the others not to get involved, or they might get into trouble. Damien stood calmly in front of the two men who had attacked him and inquired if they even knew who he was. He then answered his own question by saying that he didn't care who they were, and that he was there to finish what they had started. One of the men yelled in rage, saying they were from the Black Serpent Gang, a group that no one in this city would dare to mess with without getting into trouble. Damien's recollection became crystal clear as soon as he heard the name. He remembered more about the Black Serpent Gang, like how they ruled the streets and scared everyone in the city. He remembered how these same men had beaten him badly and humiliated him only because he complained about a high bill at one of the gang's businesses. He remembered how the gang's men ridiculed and beat him up until he had to give in totally. Damien smiled a dark and scary smile as memories came flooding back. He understood that he was the one who really needed an apology. One of the gang members started to threaten Damien, claiming that this time he wouldn't go easy on him simply because he was a noble. Then he got ready to hit him. The man charged toward Damien with all his strength, swinging his weapon. Damien was ready. Damien easily avoided the attack, leaving the man shocked and unable to understand what had just happened. The gang member fell to the ground in anguish and started coughing up blood. Damien walked up to him in a calm but scary way and claimed that even if he killed every gang member, it wouldn't be enough to assuage his anger. He held his firearm over the man's head, but at the last second, he stopped himself for the sake of his family. Even though the man begged and begged, Damien hit him hard, and it had a huge effect. After the hit, both men were on the ground in terrible pain and couldn't move. As he watched the event unfold from a distance, another gang member yelled loudly, asking who this individual was who had caused so much trouble. Damien quickly ran across another bunch of gang members who were ready to fight. The head of the new group asked Damien if he was part of another group and whose faction he was in. Damien calmly and firmly said that he wasn't part of any group. He had come to apologize, but now he was the one who wanted an apology from the owner of the place for what had transpired. The gang boss didn't trust what Damien said and told him that if he didn't come quietly, they would have to use force. Then the commander pointed at Damien and told the group to attack. The gang members ran toward Damien with alarming speed, and he braced himself again, feeling a little tired from all the fights. He took a big breath to get ready for the fight, and his face showed that he was determined and ready. Damien started a battle with quick, accurate moves, avoiding the gang members' blows and hitting them with forceful, quick strikes that were surprisingly strong. The gang members were shocked and in pain, shouting in anguish and uncertainty over what was going on. Their boss stood still, watching his men fall one by one. Even though Damien was very strong, he was really tired and knew that even this modest exertion had already made him out of breath. Then Damien asked the gang leader if he still wanted to fight, but to his astonishment, the leader backed away in fear and begged Damien to forgive him. Damien, on the other hand, didn't take the apology very well. He charged at the man again, this time with scary speed, which made the man run away screaming in fear. The scared leader ran away in a panic, wanting to get away from Damien's anger that couldn't be stopped. Inside the tavern, everything were calm. People were talking and didn't know what was going on outside. But soon the strange sounds from outside had their attention, and they stopped for a while to listen. At that moment, the leader of the gang came into the tavern in a panic, mumbling to himself in a shaky voice that he had lost control of the situation. He was in amazement when he suddenly remembered that Damien was just behind him. Damien talked to the man in a sarcastic way, threatening him and told him he should have listened when he was still being courteous. Damien threw the gang leader across the tavern with a lot of force, which shocked and drew the attention of everyone around. Damien quickly understood the dilemma he had put himself in after doing that. His expression showed shock and disbelief. Things immediately fell apart at the place. The guests started to scream and run in fright, yelling that there was a killer and telling everyone to get out. After the first fright, Damien stood quietly in the middle of the room, sure that he had dealt with the worst portion of the problem. But soon, a new voice spoke from above and asked what was going on. Anderson Holm, the tavern owner, came in looking irate and shocked that his guards were gone. Damien answered calmly and with clear confidence that he had dealt with the guards properly. This made the tavern owner even more angry and shocked. Anderson couldn't believe what he saw as he glanced at his hurt men. He was amazed that this young man had been able to beat members of the Black Serpent gang so effortlessly. He wanted to know who Damien was and why he thought it was okay to cause trouble in his business. Damien plainly and proudly said his entire name, Damien Haxon. This made Anderson look even more startled when he understood that Damien was a noble from the Haxon line. Damien made it clear that he wasn't there to stir trouble. He was there to get an apology from the pub owner personally. Anderson couldn't understand this, but Damien went on to say that this location used to charge crazy prices, and when he complained, gang members beat him up and humiliated him, an occurrence that gave him a bad name as a drunken troublemaker in the city. Damien then remembered the day his father kicked him out of the house for acting badly over and over again. He went on to say that the episode had cost his family a lot of money and caused them a lot of pain. But Anderson made fun of what Damien said in a cynical way, saying that maybe he was mourning his lost honor. Then he added with derision that he didn't think House Haxon had any honor left to lose in the first place. Anderson sought to get Damien angry by making fun of him and calling him pitiful. He stated he would never say sorry and instead demanded that Damien pay for the damage he had done. Damien smiled quietly and mysteriously, knowing that he might have forgiven the man if he had just said sorry nicely. But now that the man had decided to fight, Damien had no choice but to do what he had to do. In a quick and surprising moment, Damien got ready to take one last big step, which shocked Anderson and made him brace himself for what was about to happen. Damien started moving toward his opponent above with an astonishing pace, which shocked everyone in the room. He made a clear warning, saying that his opponent would pay dearly for what he had said earlier. Damien's expression showed a ferocious determination. Damien's eyes flashed with a piercing, frightening light as he was ready to stab someone with his knife. A very swift and unexpected movement came toward Damien, all of a sudden, catching him off guard and surprising him. A fierce fight broke out, sending out a strong and beautiful aura that startled Damien with how strong it was. The aura knocked Damien to the ground, and Anderson looked from above with a mix of admiration and worry. Anderson came out from behind the strange knight and said hello to him with evident relief, calling him Lord Ted. Damien was amazed that someone like Lord Ted would be working in a place like this. Damien was shocked and silently wondered why a knight would be in such a place at that moment. The knight known as Ted was fully visible, wearing a beautiful suit of armor. Some of his face was hidden in the shadows, which made people even more afraid of him.
A short introduction explained the several levels of knights, from trainees to fully fledged knights who could skillfully manipulate their auras. It was evident what the order of things was. Trainee, advanced trainee, and full knight. It was said that full knights had incredible power and could use aura in ways that were beyond human. The story went on to say that full knights could break mountains with one strike, or cut through fortress walls like paper. The proprietor of the tavern laughed in a mocking, bragging way as he proudly said that the knight in front of them, Ted, was just an advanced trainee of the Black Serpent gang. He kept going with a smug tone, saying that Damien was as good as dead, but Damien made fun of him by saying, "So he's just a trainee then?" This made Ted angry and he stayed quiet for a bit. Damien said in a mocking tone that he had felt an incredibly faint aura emanating from Ted, which showed that Ted had not yet learned how to fully manage it. Damien thought to himself, why would a knight, even a trainee, work in such a low-grade place? He thought Ted had been kicked out because he wasn't good at anything. The bar owner then tried to exploit the situation to his advantage by giving Ted money to kill Damien swiftly, but Ted put off the payment because he wanted to deal with Damien first and settle matters in person. Ted quickly and violently attacked Damien, promising to make him pay for being rude. Damien handled the onslaught with calmness and stability, displaying no symptoms of panic. The fight that followed was so strong that it broke the floor beneath their feet. Still, Damien had to acknowledge to himself that his opponent was rather decent for a trainee. He could see just how stable Ted's movements were, even when he swung his weapon hard and wide. The edge of it didn't shift. Ted launched another stunning attack filled with aura, which impressed Damien and attracted his complete attention. Damien started to feel very tired and worn out from the long fight. He knew that his body was getting close to its limit. Ted, on the other hand, got angrier and yelled at Damien, "You bastard! Let's see how you get away with this one." Ted put all this effort into the last blow, which was full of energy and aura, and he was determined to end the fight. Damien immediately knew what kind of assault was coming and whispered to himself that technique. Ted, his opponent, used a secret move that looked beautiful and terrifyingly powerful, taking on a lot of energy. Damien chose to use a specific tactic of his own and began to prepare for a counterattack in a strong and steady way. Damien's spots suddenly filled with recollections of the past, especially the day he fought a man named Dorcas who seemed astonished to be called at that moment in that memory. Another scary person showed up. The Lord of the Death Knights, who came in at a high pace and dealt a fatal blow. The Death Knight Lord told someone else to shut up and leave right now if he wanted to live. But the man wouldn't leave. He stood resolutely with his weapon in hand, ready to face the threat. The Death Knight Lord, who was clearly annoyed by the man's insistence, said he had no choice but to murder him too. He started to show off his unique power, saying a scary voice that the human body is primarily made of water. His shape changed into something that moved like water, making the scene extra scarier and stranger. The Death Knight Lord used a special method to let his weapon go through his opponent's body, like it was water, with no resistance at all. The opponent fell to the ground right away after the fatal blow and the death. Knight Lord said that even a wooden weapon could pierce a person with that move. He walked up to his opponent, who was on the ground, and told him that he should have gone away when he had the chance. The Death Knight Lord suddenly felt something was off and started to look about with obvious fear. He was shocked when something started to take shape around him. His face made it plain that he was now dealing with something very frightening and unexpected. The Death Knight Lord was absolutely shocked and terrified, asking how his opponent was still standing. He asked out loud if the man was one of the deceased. He started to gather all of his power again so he could face the new menace in front of him. But before he could do anything, he was hit by a swift and very strong surprise strike that left him very hurt. He couldn't believe it and asked where this strength came from. He looked shocked and like he was going to pass out, and he asked his opponent with obvious concern, "How do you know that technique?" Then the image went back to Ted, who would have been badly hurt and remained still for a time, knowing right away that this was the end for him. Ted, the training knight, fell to the ground and didn't move. It was shocking to everyone who saw it. Damien understood that all of his earlier fights had ended the same way. Everybody who fought him ended up dead. Damien realized that he had a special gift. He could take the power of his opponents and use it against them. The tavern owner shook with fear as he witnessed what had just transpired. He ran away in fear after seeing how powerful Damien was. The tavern owner looked at Damien with fear and despair all over his face, knowing full well how serious the situation he had put himself in was. The tavern owner suddenly bowed and apologized profusely to Damien, saying how sorry he was for ruining the good name of the aristocratic Saxon family. He hesitantly asked Damien if a significant sum of money would be adequate to make up for the embarrassment he had caused. Damien grudgingly accepted the offer, telling himself that the apology was the most important thing, but he wouldn't turn down extra money. He calmly turned around and told someone to collect all the money and goods in the room. With full confidence and clear authority. Victor the servant looked in hesitatingly, following Damien's order, with a shaky yes, sir, as he saw what had happened. Victor thought to himself in disbelief that he would never have believed it if he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes. He was quite curious about when and where Damien had learned to use a sword so well. The proprietor of the restaurant said goodbye to Damien and Victor with courteous, apprehensive gestures, hoping they would be safe on the trip home. Victor yelled with excitement as they departed. It was the first time in his life he had seen so much wealth and treasure. The bar owner, on the other hand, was quiet and clearly disturbed. The owner of the tavern promised himself that he would get back every gold coin from Damien, and that he would ask the Black Serpent's boss for help. But then he was kicked by something out of the blue, which shocked and panicked everyone around him. The tavern owner yelled in anguish and helped his hurt. Year after one of Damien's brutal hidden moods, Damien came up to the bar owner and made it apparent that he was a threat. He ordered the owner to tell the Black Serpent gang that he would never forgive them if they ever thought about hurting his family again. The proprietor of the bar was on the ground in a lot of agony, cursing and threatening Damien under his breath. He promised that he would get back at him one day. Damien and Victor departed the site peacefully as the sun fell. Taking the treasures they had found with them as they left, Damien thought to himself, knowing that what he had done would not erase all of his past errors. He promised his family that he would never let them down or fail them again. In this second chance at life. Damien smiled at Victor and told him to go home. Victor cheerfully said, "Yes, young master." Meanwhile, a luxurious mansion with the name Marquis Leon Blum came into view. Inside, a young man spoke softly to his brother and asked if he had ever heard the saying, "Love always comes with pain." The brother looked confused and asked if he was going to a duel based on his dramatic expression, but the young man calmly replied with a mysterious smile that he wasn't going to a duel. He was on a quest to find love. Damien and Victor came at the Hax and Baron estate. At that time, Damien stretched out and told Victor that he hadn't slept that well in a long time. Victor quietly conceded to himself with a trace of jealousy that Damien could sleep so soundly while he had been awake all night, worried about what had happened the day before. Damien giggled a little and said that things had gone very differently from what he had intended at first, but in the end they had been paid well. He also said with a lot of confidence that reports about what he'd done would quickly go worldwide and no one would ever look down on house tax. And again, Victor agreed and started to see Damien in a new light. For the first time, he realized that Damien had a bright mind and real awareness that he hadn't observed previously. He still worried about the Black Serpent gang, especially since they had left a trainee knight and a few gang members in bad shape. Damien told him with tremendous confidence that no matter how brave the gang was, they wouldn't dare attack a noble household so lightly. If they did, he would fight them himself. Victor was very interested in where and when Damien had learned such advanced fighting methods, because he was so good at them. Damien hesitated for a moment and smiled nervously before stating that he only trained when he had the chance. A loud, angry voice suddenly yelled Damien's name, cutting off their talk right then and there. Damien's father came out of nowhere, angry and racing toward him, roaring in rage and asking where he had been all day. Damien's dad ran over to him and grabbed him, worried that Damien had gotten into trouble again. Damien beamed with confidence and told his dad that he had fixed the problem he had caused. Exactly like he said he would. Then he told Victor to show his dad what they had gotten. When Victor opened the big bag full of gold and other valuable things, Damien's parents were so shocked that they yelled, "Our money!" Damien told the story and said that he had gone back to the tavern where he had been booted out, and straightened up the misunderstanding there. The bar owner gave them these gems as an apology because the fault was in the billing. The father was still amazed, but he quietly wondered if he could truly believe such a story. The mother, on the other hand, was sure it had to be genuine and asked where else such treasure could have come from. Damien said to his dad, "You can ask Victor, who has been with me the whole time, if you don't believe me." He looked at Victor, who then confirmed the narrative. Damien granted again with full assurance, and told Victor again to agree with what he said. Victor paused for a time, then blurted out a yes, which ultimately satisfied Damien's parents. Totally. Everyone praised Damien, but Victor privately recognized in himself that Damien couldn't say a single thing without lying. That's Megan, both amazed and confused. Damien let out a sigh of relief outside in a quiet spot, happy that the issue had been addressed in his favor. He started running into the woods as fast as he could to see how much he could do physically and how long he could keep going, but he quickly got tired and out of breath and had to stop to lean against a tree. Damien thought about his body and how its limits would keep him from reaching his ambitions, while he gathered his breath. Damien still craned brightly and took out a small vial, telling himself how lucky he was to have gotten such a valuable thing. He remembered asking the bar owner about the contents of this strange small bottle. Out of curiosity. The tavern owner had just told them that the vial had a rare tonic made by the Dan School of Alchemy to greatly boost vitality and stamina. Damien had questioned the pub owner in a confused tone what the Dan School of Alchemy was. The owner said it was an organization that made tonics and alchemical elixirs. Damien then remembered that he had heard of the school before. It was very famous, and its products were so expensive that they were sold by weight in jewels. He grinned again in relief, realizing how lucky he was to have gotten such a rare and useful tonic. Damien started taking the tonic in the hopes that would have strong, good benefits. A strong and bright aura began to build about him, and Damien could feel the tonic, giving him more strength and vitality. He started to make serious plans for the future, telling himself that in order to get real power, he would first had to improve his stamina. Damien decided that he needed to get back to the same level of power he had in his prior life, especially to face darkness. He could still see doors, a scary face clearly, and knew that doors. Zombie followers will come back to this earth in a few years. So Damien made up his mind that he needed to get the power to murder Dorghost before that happened. He understood that he could only really defend his family's happiness if he got that strong. Damien took a long breath and let it out slowly, ready for the next steps on his path to greatness. He jumped forward with all his strength and ran ahead, promising himself, "This time I will kill you for sure." Diegeos. In the meantime, the moonlight revealed the hidden base of the Black Serpent, which was far away and dark. This was where Doorpost was said to live. A man within the head spoke bitterly while eating carelessly. He said that the person who had been vanquished was no longer helpful, and that they had just lost one of their best men. The Black Serpent gang felt bad for Ted and thought about giving him some medical help, but their leader, Cedric Walker, told them to ignore him and tossed him away, saying he was no longer useful. One of the guys paused at Cedric's order, nervously wondering whether he was sure, but Cedric made it clear that Ted needed to be thrown away somewhere far away. Cedric made it plain how cruel he was by adding that there was no need for a dog that had outlived its usefulness, they could just hire someone else with money. Ted suddenly started to move, trying to get up, which caught everyone's attention. Cedric saw this and laughed, adding, "Looks like he has enough strength to move after all." Cedric grinned wickedly and told Ted that if he agreed to get medical help, he would think about hiring him again. But Ted angrily turned down the offer and ran for quickly yelling that he didn't need Cedric's help. When Ted charged, he suddenly stopped in midair, which was both scary and strange and shocked everyone who saw it. Ted was astonished and perplexed when a dark energy aura materialized behind him. Out of nowhere, the black power hit him hard and he screamed in fear, asking what the heck was going on. A cloaked guy showed in at that moment and asked Cedric, the Black Serpent boss, if this level of strength was enough for a first demonstration. Cedric said, of course, with apparent pleasure, and ordered him to show King what else he could do. Ted screamed in anger, begging to be let go, but the odd man started chanting an incantation of phrases in a weird, esoteric language, which made Ted even more anxious. A scary dark energy started to swirl about Ted, and he screamed in fear without knowing what was going on. Demonic-looking energy wrap around Ted and swallow him. Cedric gave the cloaked guy the money he needed for the mission, and the man thanked him quietly. The strange man smiled in a way that made Cedric shiver and told him he could trust on him for the job ahead. Damien was getting exhausted from all the hard training he had been doing in other places. Damien kept going even though he was tired, and he did much better as a result. He saw that the tonic he had taken worked really well. His stamina had noticeably improved in a short amount of time. Damien couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Even when everything were going well, he saw that things had been oddly calm for days. He thought the Black Serpent game would get back again immediately, but he was shocked that nothing had happened yet. This made him feel nervous, as if something was going on behind the scenes. Damien saw something move behind him that was strange and sudden. He quickly turned to face it, muttering to himself, just as I thought. He ran forward very quickly, cursing those Black Serpent bastards. In anger, he hit the figure hiding in the bushes hard with his hand, and the figure screamed in pain. Damien was shocked when he saw the face of the person he had hit and said, "You?" It was his younger brother, Abel Jackson, who looked up at him in fear and said, "Big brother." Abel sat on the ground, shocked and in pain from what had just transpired. After that he calmed down and laughed, telling Damien that he had gotten a lot stronger since they last saw each other. He joked that he thought Damien had almost broken his neck. Damien remembered a sad recollection from the past as he saw Abel lying dead on the ground. Damien was quiet for a minute, clearly moved by the memories he held of his hand and a real apology, and told Abel that wasn't on purpose. Abel glanced at Damien's palm for time. Still not sure. Damien took a little break before continuing, making it clear that he hadn't come only to say sorry. Abel spoke in a serious tone, explaining that their father had told them that Damien had gone to the bar to settle things amicably, but subsequently learned that a brawl had broken out and people had been hurt. Abel looked at Damien with suspicion in his eyes and said, "You can't be the one who did that. Are you lying to the family?" "No. It's true. I did it myself," Damien said calmly and with assurance to his brother. Abel was angry and yelled at Damien, saying he was lying, and asked if he had hired someone else to do it because he couldn't fight. He then pointed at Damien and told him not to bring additional shame to the family. He also said that he always had to clean up after Damien's messes. Damien gently touched Abel's head to try to soothe him down and connect with him again. Damien thought about how Abel had always been the smart one who put the family's needs before all else. Damien smiled softly at Abel and said, "There's nothing to worry about. Nothing bad will happen again." A voice from far away abruptly stopped their discourse. One of the family's servants yelled "Young masters," and hurried toward them, out of breath, crying, "There's a serious problem." The brothers glanced at him with surprise and worry, as if they were trying to figure out what was going on. They ran back to the house in a hurry, feeling anxious and tense. Damien swiftly unlocked the door and went into the room. Abel followed closely behind his face, showing how worried he was about what might happen. Damien's father yelled angrily, "Damien, you!" as soon as he walked in. Then a calm voice from within the room said, "So you're here?" Irvin Leon Blum showed over with a sly smile and said he had just told Damien's father what transpired at the party and was sorry for coming over without warning. Damien was angry that this event had already happened and firmly remembered that this person was Irwin Leon Blum. He remembered the same moment that happened at the party from his past existence. Damien had yelled at Irwin in anger. "What the hell did you just say?" And Irwin had tried to excuse himself by saying he didn't mean to offend anyone. Damien yelled at Irwin, telling him that he had made fun of him and tried to bother his sister. Irwin then made fun of Damien, saying that he must be intoxicated since he didn't remember anything like that. Irwin came in closer and whispered angrily, And what if I had actually done it? A wicked and challenging smirk appeared on Erwin's face as he clearly added, and what could you do about it if I had said it? This made Damien even angrier. Damien remembered how he had to hold down his wrath in circumstances like these in the past. Damien hit Erwin in the face with a powerful punch, knocking him to the ground without thinking. Erwin fell to the ground, blood pouring from his face and howling in anguish from the blow. Damien thought that although Erwin was an experienced knight, he absorbed the punch easily, as if he had planned for it to happen. Erwin then sought to turn the situation to his advantage by pretending to be embarrassed and publicly admitting how much he loved Louise. He then unexpectedly suggested to her father that they get married. Erwin sat quietly on the couch and made it obvious that he wanted the Viscount's permission to marry Louise. Erwin made it plain and serious that he wanted to marry Louise. The whole family was shocked and couldn't believe what had happened. Damien believed to himself that Erwin was using the same trick he had used in his last incarnation to blackmail his family. Erwin told Louise his father that if he agreed to the marriage, they should think of the situation as a simple family mistake. Louise's father answered without hesitation, firmly telling him it was impossible and would never happen. Erwin smiled wickedly and asked out loud how much the Haxon family could handle the anger of his own family, who were demanding that they accept responsibility for insulting him. Erwin viciously told Louise his father that he had to either pay the price for disrespecting him or consent to marry Louise. Louise's father knew in his heart that the Leon Blum family was very strong in the kingdom, but he couldn't give his daughter to someone who was known for being wicked. Louise walked into the room slowly and steadily at that moment. Louise looked everyone in the eye and calmly said to everyone's amazement that she would marry him. Everyone was shocked. Her father yelled loudly, saying he didn't agree with her choice. While Abel stood there shocked and upset, telling her to think about it again. Damien walked up to her with apparent sadness and whispered. Sister Louise smiled calmly and said, "It's okay. I will follow Lord Erwin," making it clear to herself that she was doing this for her family. Even in this lifetime. Erwin chuckled to himself, thinking, this is enough. He applauded Louise's decision in a mean-spirited way, and said you would send someone shortly to set up the official engagement. Damien looked at Erwin with a keen gaze and walked up to him with confidence, plainly daring him. Erwin smiled in a way that made Damien want to say something, but he continued to be nasty by saying, "Oh, maybe I should call you my dear brother-in-law. Now." Damien was very angry at Erwin for being rude and cold, and he blamed him for ruining his sister's life without even trying. Louise saw that her brother Damien was worried and calmly called out to him to attempt to stop him with a sarcastic smirk. Erwin kept teasing Damien, this time stating, "I didn't hear you clearly, dear brother-in-law," and directing his remarks at him again. Damien hit Erwin in the face with a very hard punch, knocking him to the ground. He yelled angrily, "I didn't hear you clearly. Can you say that again?" Damien remembered how he had to hold back his fury for the sake of his family and sister in the past, but this time he wouldn't hesitate and would address the matter head-on. Damien sprang up in anger and glared at Erwin, who had fallen to the ground because of the force of his hit. He raised his fist high and yelled in a clear voice of rage. He responded, "No, you bastard, and he can't take any more of this." Then he remembered the time he had run out of the location in a hurry, leaving it in a cloud of feelings. Damien ran quickly when he heard from one of the maids that the vehicle with Miss Louise and Lord Erwin had just arrived. Damien hurried to the door with a lot of energy because he was very excited to see his sister Louise after being away for so long. But just as he was about to open the door, he heard a loud, scary scream from within the room. Damien observed Erwin angrily pulling Louise by the hair and yelling at her for making him bring her home. The door opened a little bit. Erwin moved closer to Louise and yelled horrible things at her, saying that she was attempting to leave him even though she came from a dirty family. He kept hurting her. Erwin stood over Louise with a scary look on his face and said, "Dear Louise." She fell to the ground in anguish. He then loomed over her with a horrible smirk and said he would teach her a lesson she would never forget, so she would never utter those things again. Damien watched as Erwin clenched his fist and got ready to hit his sister, Louise. Damien stood still, feeling helpless, and started to hug himself for what was happening to his sister. Now recalling that it was his own bad choice that had led to it. He went to his knees, feeling tremendously guilty, and kept saying to himself that everything that was occurring was his fault. Damien's eyes were full of rage as he promised himself that he would never forgive Erwin Leon Blum for what he had done. Damien got up again, raised his hand high, and spoke with a lot of anger. He answered, "No." Everyone in the room was completely shocked by how rude Damien was. The guards for Erwin soon ran to him, shocked at what had just occurred to their master in drawing their weapons. The guards yelled at Damien, "Don't tell us you really hurt our Beyond Lord." Erwin struggled to get up as they leveled their swords at him. He wiped his face calmly with a sarcastic smirk as if nothing had happened. He stood tall and held his sword while sneering at Damien. "You dare to hit my face?" "Not once, but twice." Then Erwin told Damien that he was going to kill him, asking if he wanted to die or something like that. "Dear brother-in-law." The guards ran toward Damien to try to get things back under control and calm Erwin, who was angry. Erwin, on the other hand, yelled at them angrily and told them to get out of the way, apparently planning to deal with Damien himself. One of the guards tried to step in and said, "Let me handle this rude fool." But Erwin wouldn't let anybody else do it. As he got ready for battle, he let out a strong aura that pushed the guards back and spoke forcefully. He had told them to stand down. Abel and Luis observed the situation with concern, clearly worried about how the fight was getting worse. Erwin stepped forward with his sword in hand, glared at Damien, and asked one last time, "How do you plan to fix this?" in a way that made it clear he was threatening him. Louise was quite scared because she knew that Erwin wouldn't let Damien go so easy anymore. Louise then yelled out in desperation to stop the fight. "Please stop." Her face revealed how scared and worried she was, and she was afraid that something awful would happen to Damien if the fight went on. Damien stood in front of Louise, protecting her. He extended his arm with evident assurance and resolve, as if to say that he would not let anything further happen to her. He smiled softly at Louise and told her not to worry. He promised to take care of the problem himself, but in his heart he wished that she wouldn't have to give up her life anymore. Damien came up and confidently told Erwin that they should resolve the matter with the duo. Erwin was shocked by the offer and said a duel. Damien calmly explained that if Erwin won a fair fight, he would do what Erwin wanted. But if Damien won, the issue would be over right then and there. Erwin said that the deal wasn't good for him, and pointed out that Louise had already consented to marry him. Damien smirked defiantly and teased Erwin, adding, "Are you trying to change the subject because you look like you're scared of losing?" Erwin was very angry about the comment. He thought to himself, "That arrogant bastard. He punched me in the face and now he talks to me like that. I've wanted to get back at him. This is the perfect chance." Erwin raised his sword with great malice and accepted the duel, vowing to hurt Damien in a way that could never be undone, and then take his sister Louise. People gathered in the estate's courtyard to see the combat between Damien and Erwin. It was evident that Damien's mom and dad were worried. Damien's mother hesitantly questioned if they should cancel the duel, but his father said that Damien's confidence might indicate he had strategy. If not, all they could do was pray for a miracle. Abel, on the other hand, disagreed with his father in his heart and firmly believed that they couldn't count on miracles. Erwin was fully focused on getting ready for the duel, and he stood confidently in the dueling field, showing off his sword skills with flair. This made Abel think that Damien had little chance of winning because he was up against a professional knight. Damien stood in front of Erwin without a weapon, which made Erwin question in a mocking way how he planned to fight without one. Damien answered with complete confidence, taking out a small eating fork and adding, "No need to worry." He flourished the fork in front of his opponent and said it was more than enough to face him. Everyone who saw Damien get ready for the combat with just a meal fork was shocked. Erwin laughed loudly, evidently making fun of Damien's choice of weapon and sarcastically questioning whether terror had made him crazy. Still, Erwin charged at Damien very quickly, saying he wouldn't hold back even though he thought it was a stupid prank. Erwin was very shocked that Damien was able to simply and quickly avoid the first attack. Erwin was angry that Damien had gotten away, so he used a devastating move from a lion's roar, combat style. He attacked Damien with the lion's roar sword technique, which generated a strong and scary aura that looked like a glowing line formed of energy. The attack shattered section of the courtyard with great intensity, sending dust flying all over the place. But Damien came out of the smoke without a single visible injury, which shocked everyone who saw it. Irwin's guards were shocked and couldn't believe how Damien was able to handle Irwin's tactics without even having a weapon. Irwin himself started to feel nervous because Damien had dodged all of his attacks so quickly in such a short amount of time. Damien smiled with confidence as he silently agreed that he now completely knew the dueling style of the Leon Blum family, owing to his recent training. He definitely remembered that he had fought Michael Leon Blum, Irwin's older brother, in a former life and almost won. Damien looked at Irwin with confidence and assured himself that Irwin's sword style had a lot more flaws than his older brother's. Irwin let out a huge wave of energy, challenging Damien to avoid this next attack as well. Damien knew right away that the aura was dangerous because it was so strong. He also thought to himself that it could be hard to avoid such an attack with just a fork. He quickly chose to use the hero, same technique which he had learned to the past as a secret skill. When Irwin and Damien's abilities clashed, there was a huge explosion of energy in the middle of the dueling ground. Louise and Abel were quite worried and tense as they watched the fight go on in front of him, in a sudden and frightening moment. Irwin's weapon hit Damien's fork, leaving Irwin clearly shocked. Damien was able to avoid Irwin's onslaught with just the fork. In a brilliant and surprising method, Damien firmly told himself that he had utilized a separate special technique called secret arc perception of the infinite current to easily avoid Irwin's strikes. Damien then rushed forward at an extraordinary speed, striking Irwin with a decisive blow while saying goodbye in his mind. Goodbye. The fork hit Irwin's neck with perfect accuracy, putting him into a state of panic and confusion. Everyone who was there was astonished, especially Damien's parents, Abel and Louise, who had not anticipated this to happen. When Irwin saw that the fork was right next to his neck, he was terrified and ran away right away. He fell to the ground in fear, crying out in pain and shame. Damien stood strong and sure of himself. He thought to himself that even though he was very angry and wanted to murder Irwin, he had decided to hold back for the sake of his family. He looked down at Irwin on the ground and said in a calm, authoritative voice, "It's clear now that I've won. Do you have any problems?" Damien moved closer to the scared Irwin and spoke with unflinching authority. "As I said before, you're leaving this place right now." Damien stood tall and gave Irwin one last clear order. "Leave now." Later, the family sat down to eat in a tense and quiet room. Damien stood up gently after eating and said in a calm voice that he was going to start his morning training again. The rest of the family sat still in worry while Damien quietly departed the room with worried eyes. The mother turned to her husband and inquired whether he was going to talk to Damien about what happened the day before. Abel started to talk, saying how shocked he was by how much Damien's behavior had changed and how different he seemed from the brother they used to know. The father ended the conversation with quiet wisdom, suggesting they should wait until Damien was ready to speak for himself. The mother looked at her husband with love, attempting to soothe him and tell them to stay strong during these hard times. The father thought to himself that he didn't really want to know what had happened because he loved Damien, but now found him scary. Damien was alone in the corridor, getting ready for physical exercise by putting on weighted sandbags. Louise suddenly yelled at him in a clear voice as she got closer. Damien stopped and looked at her, eager to hear what she had to say. Louise smiled softly and told him she was glad he hadn't left yet. She admitted that she had been afraid to talk to him about what occurred the day before. Damien instantly remembered that he needed to say sorry to her for what he did, and really meant it when he said he was sorry for being so impulsive and perhaps embarrassing her. Louise cut him off right away and stated it wasn't like that at all. Attempting to stop him from blaming himself, she moved closer to Damien and thanked him with a warm, sincere smile for what he had done for her. Louise silently told herself that she had been scared when she promised to follow Irwin, and that she never really wanted to do it. Damien was touched by what Louise said he had known. She must have felt that way, and in that moment he recognized how important his act had been for her. Louise remembered everything that had happened before, like how Damien had stood up to Irwin, and she knew she wanted to tell her brother how much she appreciated him. She smiled truly, her face full of warmth and thanks as she thanked Damien from the bottom of her heart for what he had done for her. Damien stopped and smiled before telling her that she should be grateful to him. He looked at his sister with love and gratitude and told her that he had always been thankful for her. Louise was shocked by what Damien said, but just as he was ready to go, she stopped him and said she had something essential to get in. Louise showed Damien a unique sword and told him with a soft grin that it was the only blade their father had ever made just for him. He had requested her to get it to him so he could use it in his training. She said that their father loved and respected Damien very much. Even if you didn't always show it. He had wanted her to make sure he knew that. Louise then told Damien, in a serious voice, that he should never use a fork instead of a sword again, just like their father would have. Damien held the sword with clear confidence, raising it high with pride, and felt delighted to get such a special gift. Their father suddenly sneezed out of nowhere. He started to wonder why he felt a sudden chill and shudder, which was strange to him outside the manor. A dark and creepy mood started to build as a shadowy, scary force moved slowly toward the home. The guards outside were bored and not paying attention, so they didn't notice the odd energy slowly closing in on them. But all of a sudden, one of the guards spots something strange was going on. He started to gaze about in a worried and anxious way. At that time, the dark energy started to take shape in front of him, making him feel confused and uneasy. The guard was terrified by what he saw and screamed in fear. Then from the darkness, a figure started to come out and walk towards him. A scary and strange figure came out of the black energy and stood out clearly at the main gate. No one inside the house saw the evil entity sneak in. Everyone in the mansion was dead, sleeping, and had no idea what was going on around them. The dark, shadowy figure quietly crept, caught Louise's room where she was still sleeping. The face of the scary man was now visible. He smiled maliciously as he looked at Louise sleeping, and said that although he was there for another task related to the Black Serpent Gang, seeing Louise was a nice surprise. He reached out to Louise, who was sound asleep with the evident goal of hurting her, but then he heard a voice behind him say, "Hey," and he jumped. The strange man whirled around in shock to see Damien standing in the doorway, calmly asking him what he was doing there. Damien spoke to the stranger with calm assurance, saying that he had felt a weird energy in the region. Then he questioned in a mocking tone, "Is there a stranger here, by any chance?" The man in the shadows was clearly upset and was wondering how Damien had stayed awake, even after using powerful magic to put everyone to sleep. He attacked at tremendous speed, sending a strong black spell toward Damien, but Damien easily evaded the spell with incredible speed and skill. The strange man yelled in anger and confusion. "Who the hell are you?" Damien calmly and confidently answered, "That's a question you should be asking yourself. This is my home." Then he asked the intruder who he was and what he planned to do to his sister. The strange man got angry as soon as he heard the guards were in voices talking about the noise they had heard near Louise's room. He quickly figured out that the guards were coming and their presence clearly making nervous and angry. The unknown man decided that it would be a problem if the guards found him, so he got ready to move quickly and get out of their sight. He quickly used black magic to get out of the room before the guards could get there. The man backed away through the glass, disappearing at an incredible speed thanks to his black magic. There was a small amount of dark energy in the air. After he left the room, Damien ran to the window, wondering if he had lost sight of the strange man. He was abruptly scared by a strange and disturbing force coming from just outside the window. People outside the manor, on the other hand, started to experience a weird sensation of discomfort. Something strange was going on. The crew at the castle stables were astonished to uncover a big problem and didn't know what to do. They found out that the coveted horse had died abruptly, which made them even more scared and worried about how the Viscount would respond. The servants were upset and inquired how such a terrible thing could have happened, especially since the horse had been fine just the day before. Damien suddenly showed up and made it apparent that this couldn't be a case of bad luck. He told the staff not to worry and made it clear that he wasn't there to blame them for what had transpired. He calmly asked them to leave for a moment so that he could look into the situation himself. Damien reached out and carefully looked over the horse's physique with great care. He concluded that the event was linked to the same energy he had felt from the strange man the night before. After looking at it, he was sure that the scary feeling he had was definitely black magic. Damien quickly realized that the person he had met last night was a dark sorcerer, which made him even more worried. The Jackson family was still sound, sleeping at that time utterly ignorant of what was going on around them. Damien was really worried about his family's safety, since he knew that this dark sorcerer could hurt them. The sorcerer. His dark energy swiftly expanded from the stables, moving away toward an unknown place. That dark line went straight to a secret cave in the woods near the estate. The strange man stood inside the cave, talking to himself, happy with what he had done so far. He made fun of the head of the Black Serpent gang, because he thought it was funny that he had tricked him by claiming the requested item was a curse. When it was really just something ordinary, the Black Sorcerer knew that he wouldn't have to worry about getting more supplies for a while, because he had gotten so much. He still felt a little bitter about his condition, though. He had to do a small job simply to get a little money because the organization was after him. He knew he had to stay concealed for a while because of what had happened. The sorcerer was about to leave when he heard Damien's voice say that he had smelled something foul. This attracted his attention right away and shocked him. The sorcerer's face changed when he turned to look at the voice and heard Damien mention that the snow meant that an old guy had been living alone here for a long time without opening a windows. The Black Sorcerer jumped back in shock when he saw Damien standing calmly in front of him. He realized that this young man was Viscount Jackson's oldest son. Damien's confident smile confirmed to the Dark Sorcerer that he was definitely the eldest son of the Jackson family, the same one who had faced him the night before. The Black Sorcerer was very worried and wanted to know how Damien had gotten there. Damien calmly and sarcastically said that he had followed the horrible smell the sorcerer had left behind. The sorcerer told Damien that he had heard about how brave he was to stand up to the Black Serpent gang, and that he was certainly not simply a careless and average person. The sorcerer said he had been careful and ready from the beginning, because he didn't know when Damien would show there. He said that the Black Serpent gang had told him to hurt the Jackson family as much as possible. Damien grinned calmly, making it plain that he was mocking the sorcerer. He told him that he was a sad man for taking on a quest that would shortly lead to his death. Damien's statement stunned the evil sorcerer, and he got very angry and upset because of what he said. The sorcerer got very angry and started using his magic. He said that he would enjoy tormenting Damien because he was such an intriguing person, and it would help him pass the time. Damien got ready for battle, holding his sword with perfect confidence. He told the Dark Sorcerer calmly that even though he had promised not to kill anyone in this life, there was one exception. Those like the Dark Sorcerer who were evil. Damien's expressions clearly showed wrath and threat, and he told the sorcerer in no uncertain terms that he hated people like him, dark sorcerers who play with other people's lives. The Black Sorcerer was shocked when he found out that Damien had figured out what he was so quickly and easily. He said that Damien was not an average person at all. The sorcerer was so angry that he sent out a huge wave of black energy that destroyed everything in its path. He yelled threats at Damien, saying if he escapes, the sorcerer will be in big trouble, so he must die now. Damien ran straight toward the sorcerer, full of confidence, and quickly and cleverly dodged his powerful and deadly blow. Damien's sudden speed stunned the sorcerer and made him hesitate for a while. During the fight, Damien hit the sorcerer with a lot of force and the sword hit him directly. The sorcerer had a hard time blocking it. The sorcerer fell back, groaning in pain, but all of a sudden his wounds started to heal at an incredible rate. Because of his evil magic. Damien was really surprised to see the sorcerer heal his wounds so quickly. He realized it was the same power he had seen in the palace earlier. At that point, Damien knew that the person he was fighting was not just any person, but someone with skills that were beyond what he had thought possible. The sorcerer smirked with deadly assurance and made fun of Damien, saying that his earlier attack had little to no effect. Damien charged with even more force and told the sorcerer that he would tear him apart until there was nothing left but dust. Damien attacked hard, hitting the sorcerer in several places. The sorcerer took a little step back after Damien's final attack and commented with a sarcastic smile that Damien's expertise was really interesting, but it wouldn't be enough to beat him. The sorcerer stopped for a time and spoke softly to Damien, saying that he had already died the moment he stepped into this area. Damien was shocked when he realized that he was encircled by a very strong and scary, magical traps on all sides. The sorcerer assured him with confidence that he had set up these traps ahead of time in case the organization came after him, and that Damien had now fallen right into them. Damien knew how bad things were for him, and knew that these traps may be very hazardous for him. The Black Sorcerer started to make fun of him, stating that Damien would deeply regret going up against someone of his high status in the world of dark magic. The Black Sorcerer used his strongest magic and said with confidence that Damien would die slowly and horribly as his body rotted. Damien's eyes showed that he was angry and determined. He started to get ready to fight this hazardous onslaught with all his power and attention. Black energy surrounded Damien with a lot of power, making the scene very tense and dangerous. The Black Sorcerer started to make fun of Damien, calling him an arrogant youngster who had run straight into his own death. He kept talking with a sly smile, saying that the more damage he did, the more money the Black Serpent gang would give him. The sorcerer was relieved that he had killed Damien, and stated he could now look for the girl he had seen the night before. But Damien's voice cut in, making fun of the type of spell the sorcerer had employed and making it clear that it was a kind of decay magic. The sorcerer was really shocked to discover that Damien was still standing strong after all that had happened to him. He wondered in a very confused way how Damien could know so much about evil magic. Damien smiled mysteriously and said, "Who knows?" Damien understood at that point that he still had the power or authority. He believed he had lost after traveling back in time. Damien had a horrifying memory of Dorcas, and remembered that the power he now had was called the authority of the rulers. He remembered Dorcas very well from his former life, when he had given him this power, and he knew how deadly things were now. Dorcas was calling him beloved Knight of Death in his remembrance, and Damien was kneeling before him in submission. Damien's memory of the sorcerer kept talking about giving him a strong body and incredible powers, but he also said that this wasn't enough. The unknown sorcerer from the past went on to say that he had given Damien this extra power to make him the ultimate weapon and embodiment of pure evil. Dorcas had given Damien a huge extra power in that memory, hoping to make him the strongest weapon possible. The sorcerer laughed, wickedly, proud of what he had done. The sorcerer was ritual cast a huge wave of dark energy to flow out in a beautiful scene. The sorcerer was in awe, his strength and authority, saying that this force was power given to him directly by the gods. The unknown sorcerer used all of his might and focus to finish the spell as quickly as possible. At that moment, the black energy seemed to be having a huge and overwhelming effect, as if they were devouring everything around it. Travis understood with all his heart and mind how big and dangerous the energy he had let loose was. Dirigo. His power started to spread through Damien's body, hurting him in a very painful and terrible way. As the sorcerer gave Damien this huge amount of power, he yelled in pain. The black energy surged all around Damien, showing how serious the situation was and how powerful he had become. The sorcerer then shouted with glee and madness that he had finally gotten what he wanted. The sorcerer looked scared, yet happy when he confirmed that he had gotten the scary power he had always wanted. The terrible force took on a grand form surrounding Damien's body, making everyone in the room feel amazement. Damien was shocked by his new power and wondered how it stayed with him even after he went back in time. Suddenly, a huge wave of energy hit the sorcerer, making the situation even more tense. Damien moved very quickly and accurately to avoid the sorcerer, a strong strike. The sorcerer was startled by how strong Damien was, and angrily inquired how he had survived his terrible spell. Damien, on the other hand, calmly and sarcastically asked, "Doesn't everyone have a secret weapon hidden away?" He was fully ready for the fight and had complete faith in himself as he remembered what the black sorcerer had said. Damien instantly understood something important: how the sorcerer had said before that he was one of the Yolanda group's top members. Damien started to remember what he knew about the old group. It was a group that used black magic to kill people. He was sure that the sorcerer's skills were far from ordinary, because he was so good at dark magic, which explained his incredible power. The sorcerer began to think that Damien had a particular kind of secret weapon, and knew that if the fight went on for too long, he would be in big trouble. He had to terminate it right away. He showed Damien a magical bracelet and said that he had planned to keep it for the church, but now he had to use it in this fight. The bracelet started to give off a blazing green magical energy that soon spread over the sorcerer's arm. As the sorcerer started to tap into the hidden power in the bracelet, magical energy flowed from his body. The bracelet changed the sorcerer's face in a big way. Now, the lad's strong and confident. A huge burst of dark energy came out of the bracelet, and Damien was shocked by how powerful it was. Damien instantly figured out that this bracelet was a magical object made to hold and hide the sorceress. Huge magical powers. An enormous, scary shape of dark energy materialized in front of Damien, and the sorcerer told him with confidence that he couldn't resist this force. The dark sorcerer used his most powerful magic with all his might, yelling at Damien to die and burn hellfire. The dark energy shot out of Damien with a lot of force, generating a huge explosion. The tremendous attack made a huge crater of evil energy, and the sorcerer thought he had finally won the war. He smirked viciously and said that Damien was now stuck in hell's fires and would stay there forever. But Damien's voice gently cut in and told, and he was quite wrong about something. When Damien told the sorcerer that the authority of grief he had was the kind that just stopped magical spells, he was very astonished. Damien appeared in front of the sorcerer, surrounded by a strange energy that protected him, a strong aura that encompassed him. The strong aura swept through the area, making all dark magic disappear. Damien said with confidence that this energy takes in all kinds of dark energy, which puts the sorcerer in a very bad spot. The sorcerer was shocked by Damien's strange power and started to fear, wondering what kind of authority this was and how Damien had gotten such power. Damien made fun of the sorcerer and told him it wasn't his business. He could just think of it as Damien having far better gear. Damien got ready for an attack, clearly angry that he had to use a power given to him by the person he hated the most. He knew he had to trust the Knight of Death skills if he wanted to beat the sorcerer in front of him. The sorcerer was very astonished to see Damien employing a powerful move called Aura Blake, which only skilled sword masters know how to do. He was so scared and shocked by Damien's ability that he begged him to wait a moment, his heart racing, but Damien didn't hesitate. He charged forward and hit with all the power of the Aura Blade, which was a deadly blow. The sorcerer's expression was full with shock and fear as he saw the strong strike coming at him. Damien's strike hit the sorcerer without him being able to defend himself. Damien's destructive blow sent a huge force into the area, causing a lot of damage. After the fight, Damien stood tall, surrounded by a strong aura that showed he had won.